Welcome. With our maintenance management, we're now going to have a look at an introduction to maintenance, and particularly talk about definitions of maintenance management, historical context, and a few other things as well. So, if you look up the concise Oxford Dictionary, it says that maintenance is to take action to preserve. Now, be cautious when you do technical studies or technical fields. There's a whole range of technical dictionaries. The Oxford Dictionary is an English dictionary, looking at grammatical, looking at the words of the basically the English language. So the obvious thing there is that, as you might imagine, it's a usable definition, but in the reality is that technical dictionaries are far better. And also in terms of professional organisations, they will also come about with terminology, not just in maintenance, but in all professions, and they'll have their own very formal definitions or industry agreed definitions with regards to maintenance engineering, control systems, civil engineering aspects, etc., etc. So keep that in mind as well. All right, so we'll take it on board, but the concise Oxford Dictionary, as I said, says maintenance means to take action to preserve. All right, other definitions. Well, I can't give you every definition, and again, some definitions, even if they are technical definitions given by professional bodies or technical people, again, there's no one real definition of anything. So just keep that in mind as well. You have to temper it with those kind of ideas. So here's some old and some new ones, and also it's to try and emphasize that language, concepts, theories, knowledge is ever evolving. So therefore then the language to describe it, the terminology to describe it, the concepts to describe it are evolving as well. All right, so here's some. Again, these are random, but just have a read through them. The purpose of maintenance is to avoid equipment failures that can prevent the production plan being achieved. Maintenance is actively implemented to ensure that equipment and installations are in good condition. Excluded are modifications or relocation of equipment, construction and installation of new equipment. See how some are workable, some are not, and some you would agree with and some you don't. And then here's a professional body, the British Standards Institute. It says that the combination of all technical and associated administration actions intended to retain an item in or restore it to a state in which it can perform its required function. So again, some of them can be cumbersome, some of them are quite formal. Again, British Standards came up with the PAS 55 work. It's been superseded by some international standards and things, but still, again, it's important. So this one here describes, and again, with maintenance management, you'll bump up against the difference between maintenance management and asset management. So, and that's a good discussion to have, good argument to have, but in some ways, as you might imagine, if you're maintaining things, well, they're an asset. So there's a tendency to think that asset management is the umbrella over the assets, plus, of course, the maintenance management of other small items. So you can, again, some people might turn around and say you can interchange asset management with maintenance management. Well, that's up for discussion. But the PAS 55 describes asset management as the systematic and coordinated activities and practices through which an organisation optimally and sustainably manages its assets and asset systems, their associated performance, risks and expenditures over their life cycles for the purpose of achieving the organisational strategic plan. So again, the key facts is there's life cycles, performance, associated performance with a strategic plan. And we're going to do strategic plan, organisational objectives, that type of thing. We're going to find that maintenance management, asset management will bounce around those things all the time. All right, so moving on into the international standard from the PAS 55. This one is that the asset management is optimising the life cycle of an asset to deliver the performance specified by the asset owner in a safe, socially beneficial and environmentally responsible way. This is by definition infers the management of both the upside and downside of asset-related risk. The optimal combination of costs, asset-related risks, and the performance and condition of assets and asset systems across the whole life cycle. Again, if you're thinking about a dirty old pump, socially beneficial, how can you make a pump socially beneficial? So again, you have to look at it holistically. Yeah, the dirty old pump that drops out all the time or always has a particular problem, stopping production, or you have to take it offline. So these things are trying to say to you that maintenance is, yeah, sure, get down and get your hands dirty and take out the pump, or replace the light bulb or replace the air filter, or all those kind of things. But it has to be seen in the context of the overall you know, idea of keeping, you know, the machine well oiled and the production running, and of course, you know, ensuring that overall your company is morally and ethically operating and it's not, you know, killing the environment, stuff like that. So the impression I hope that you're gaining is that maintenance is just more than, you know, grease monkeys and electricians running around doing things. All right, so you might think that in reality maintenance is an art, a science, a philosophy, because it encompasses all these range of things. So it's an evolving thing. It's been evolving quite some time, you'll see. Now, maintenance is a composite function combining many different types of activity: planning, purchasing, personnel, quality control, incentives, technical and engineering problems. So I'm sure if you've had some experience in maintenance engineering, you'd appreciate that it certainly covers all those things. If you're new to maintenance management or asset management, you'll find also, again, it has things that obviously are interrelated like that, but there are lots of other things as well. Safety as well might be another example. All right, so I guess the bottom line is, what are we maintaining and why do we do it? Why do we maintain? So what is it? Well, obviously, of course, you know, it is that we're going to maintain that thing over there, but is it in some ways, you know? So, you know, what should be maintained? You might have pieces of equipment that might be old, but, you know, reliable. So therefore then, you know, okay, look, we'll let them run to fail, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, or other times you'll say, oh no, Old Faithful, we've got to make sure we keep that up to date and, you know, refurbish it or what the case may be. So the key question to answer, I guess, is that, you know, what should it be that's being maintained? And that's a pretty big decision to make in lots of ways. So the key to the answer is that you identify the maintenance causing items in your particular, you know, organization, company, unit, whatever the case may be. Why do we maintain? Well, it's due to support the business objectives. And you say, no, I do it so that I can make the pump keep running. Yeah, that's true. But the, you know, when the pumps keep running, it means that, you know, the slurry keeps flowing. So therefore, then the reality is, of course, that you can meet your production demand. So you've met financial commitments, etc., as well as production commitments. So therefore, you're meeting the business objectives. So that's what we're saying, is that with maintenance management, you have to step back as a management. You have to step back and look at it more holistically. So the first step in maintenance planning process is understand the business objectives. Now, once you understand that, methods of maintaining assets can be determined. Because the reality is that you might want to maintain everything that you have to golden standard, and that can be a huge problem. But the reality is that the business objective is that no, it blew up, yeah, get rid of it, get another win. You know, it just depends on the production at the time, depends on the price of iron ore, for argument's sake. If something happens and it's much, you know, if that pump or whatever it might be, machine is causing a massive problem and the price of iron ore is through the roof, well, you know, the cost of a new bulldozer compared to, you know, stopping the whole production line, okay? So therefore the business objectives are exceptionally important in that context. But business objectives change frequently, just like I said. Price of iron ore goes through the roof, so the objective now is to, you know, sell to China plus other international countries. So the reality, of course, is that 6 months ago, a year ago, your business objective might have made sure that iron ore was just being sold to the UK or to Japan, for argument's sake. And it can change radically, as we've seen with China's expansion over the last decade or so. So therefore, then you want to pump out as much iron ore as you can. So it means that you've got to go back and look at your maintenance objectives as well. So some reasons for maintaining that you maintain the agreed service level to your clients and customers, rate of supply of goods, quality of supply of goods, just like the iron ore, just like coffee, you know, coffee production, for argument's sake. It could be producing aluminium. You've signed an agreement that you're going to produce so many tons and send it to them in this particular quality range. So, yep, maintaining the agreed service levels, minimize life cycle costs of the assets, ensure the compliance with statutory laws. Again, you know, you can't have a leaky pump that's causing, you know, water to get into streams. You can't afford that to get then into the reef, for argument's sake. So therefore, there are statutory laws from an environment point of view, as an example, that you would need to do that. Air quality would be another example. You must comply with that. So you're going to maintain that particular piece of equipment so it doesn't compromise those statutory laws. Ensure the maintenance of safety standards. For obvious reasons, you don't want something that if you don't maintain, it's going to blow up or you know, sadly kill somebody. So some common sense things in that regard. So how do we maintain? Well, there are three major ways that seen as categories for maintenance. That's the fixed time or usage-based maintenance, and you'll see different terms for these kind of things, but that's okay. They mean the same thing. So again, as we said, terminology, phraseology, meanings, do get tempered and evolve over time. But in this case, just to give you, some background, the fixed time or usage-based maintenance is that maintenance that's carried out at fixed times or outputs. At the end of this particular production run, we're going to go back and strip everything down. Cycles of operation could be, again, there's a downturn in the market. So, right, okay, we can see that that's predicted in 6 months. The market, share market's going down, that type of thing. But in a general sense, it's, if it's 10,000 hours that air filter has to be changed, well, fixed time says, right, it's 10,000 hours, pull out that air filter and we'll change it. Condition-based maintenance, well, the reality there is that you monitor the actual condition of the particular asset and you decide what needs to be done. So the maintenance only performed when there's certain indicators, obviously the bearings are wearing down or something like that. So the actual physical condition of that particular device is one way to, to make decisions about the maintenance. Operate to fail or on failure maintenance or run to fail. As I say, different terminology for the same thing. And literally, as I say, you deliberately run the asset until it falls over, blows up, breaks, whatever the case may be, you rip it out and you try and get as much out of that machine as possible before you go about replacing it. And that's quite brutal form of maintenance, as you might imagine. Now there is a fourth method, but again, where you bring this in, it could be on green sites. You can do it on brown sites, but the reality there is it may be major costs because you've already got on a brown site, you've already got infrastructure set in, you've already got a process going, but it's not impossible. And that fourth method is to design out the problem. In other words, just eliminate it. So it aims to redesign those parts of equipment which consume high levels of maintenance effort or spares cost, or which have unacceptably high failure rates, and strategy differs from all the others in that it's a one-off activity as opposed to a repetitive activity designed to prevent failure. So in other words, as I say, you either do it right at the start of a greenfield, or the idea is that this is a major overhaul, so we're going to redesign that bit of our particular production line, plant, whatever the case may be. But it's a kind of one-off. It's not this reoccurring maintenance that we're seeing with fixed time, condition-based, or run to fail. All right, now each method, as you might imagine, has its advantages and disadvantages, and all have a place within the maintenance plan. Okay, some good, some bad, but that's the reality. Now the maintenance strategy identifies which method is going to be the best fit for maintaining individual equipment. All right, keep those things in mind. How do we know how well we are maintaining? Yeah, so that means records, documents, all that type of stuff. So in lots of ways you can tell when poor maintenance is occurring compared to good maintenance if you don't have good records. So you can quantify maintenance department outputs or maintenance units outputs in terms of hours, the frequency of shutdowns, overhauls, stops in production, downtime, all that type of stuff. And so therefore then, you can quantify things. Positive effects of good maintenance on the workforce. Some of these things are a little bit harder. In other words, you've got good morale because things aren't breaking all the time. People are able to go and do their work without being fully pressured to get it, done within the next hour and a half type of stuff. So some of those things, are quite unquantifiable. You can't really say, oh, that saved us, $1 million because everybody's happy. So yes, sometimes when you go back to management to sort of say, well, look, we have to do this because the crew are exhausted, etc., or yeah, really? Sorry, what are we paying for crew to be happy? We're here to make money and make sure the production works. So, it might sound odd, but the reality is that if you do have good maintenance practices, then it's hard to convince management at times that you've got value for money. If some of the realities of getting this done means that you are able to do a good job and get people in and out, get their job done, get everything back up and working again, and production rolls on. Indicators of poor maintenance practices are easy to identify, as I mentioned. Excessive machine breakdowns, frequent emergency work, lack of an equipment replacement program. So therefore, then you've got all sort of equipment, and you've got no succession plan with regards to bringing in new equipment. And even so, no succession plan for maintenance supervisors. So the point of the matter is that somebody's been there for the last 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and they move on, and it's like, oh, hang on a minute, who's going to take over now? So that person knew things in and out. They knew exactly, as soon as somebody said, oh yeah, pump number 3, they went, oh yeah, that's right, yeah, go and fix it. Yep, that'll be that. That type of thing. So if you don't have a succession plan, if you don't have other junior members moving up and training them, or keeping in mind that you might have to have, you know, move people around so that they're getting more experience, yeah, it's a poor maintenance practice if you don't do that. Inadequate technical training and maintenance. Again, if you've got people that have been trained some time ago, things change, machines change, control systems change, engine systems change. So again, very, very important to keep your staff adequately qualified, or to attract adequately qualified staff as well, and experienced staff. So therefore, that brings you to the point of, like, how do you start measuring this stuff? So maybe there's some performance indicators, in particular key performance indicators, and they flow from, again, the business objectives, which are set far above where you are down in the you know, down in the workshop. So in keeping those things in mind, those business objectives, also, you know, strategic objectives, which are for the whole organization, and then come down to your maintenance unit, you're going to have your own strategic objectives. So Moore talks about KPIs, the key performance indicators set at strategic level, might include things like return on net assets. Okay, yep, that makes sense. Product unit costs, yep. Percentage plant capacity utilization, or uptime overall equipment effectiveness. In other words, you've got things there that you're using. It's not something being mothballed or sitting in the corner. You're making sure that things are being used to their capacity. Training time per employee, customer satisfaction. Moore also suggests that the key performance indicators at operational level are key to supporting the business measures. And these things include uptime or overall equipment effectiveness, first pass quality yields, cycle times, defect rate, equipment process capability, again, keeping all data and, you know, doing some statistical analysis. Maintenance costs as a percentage of the plant replacement value, percentage of downtimes, planned and unplanned downtimes, so keeping that in mind. Percentage overtime that you're paying if you're pulling people out and they have to, you know, spend a long time either out in the field or in the workshop fixing stuff. So again, you know, from that operational level, that means, you know, your costs are going through the roof. The average life mean time between repairs for, you know, critical machinery. All right, all good ways to start measuring performance indicators. Now, there are other ways to consider KPIs. It's possible to measure inputs to maintenance and outputs from maintenance, or the maintenance process itself. So therefore, then, you know, you can look at efficiencies there, you can look at savings, you can look at just best practice or good practices. So things like, so we can break that down into 3 things: inputs, outputs, and internal. So inputs, maintenance skills and competencies measured with a skills matrix. You know, like when basically talking about standard time, standard rates, and defining those kind of jobs. So there's a skills set, if you like, a skills base that you can check and make sure that people are up to those and you know, have good competencies in those things. Equipment maintenance strategies measured by a number of strategies in place. So obviously looking at ensuring that you have good efficiencies, so input to those things. Planned maintenance measured by planned maintenance index. So again, making sure that as you do holistically look across your plant, your machinery, whatever it might be, and looking at the planning of it, you're able to then, you know, schedule that appropriately. So you've got inputs into that so that you can say, as things are chugging along, well, yeah, the planned maintenance shutdown that we're going to have in, you know, say there's a shutdown in 6 months' time. Well, you can make sure you've gathered all your information and it's all ready there to ensure that you put it in place once everything's shut down. Or just in general sense, may not be shut down, or you might just pull out a haul truck and bring it into the workshop. So therefore, then, rather than waiting for it to, you know, have something go wrong with it, you're working towards that and making sure that you're checking the data on the particular haul truck, for argument's sake, so that when it does come in for its planned maintenance, you've got all the spare parts lined up, everything's ready to go. Outputs, well, plant reliability, plant availability, and plant condition and product quality. Internals, maintenance backlog and maintenance labour utilisation. So KPIs for maintenance, the inputs, they enable the level of proactive measures to be gauged, and the outputs enable measurements of results of all your efforts. Worthwhile to use all 3 types of measurement within your maintenance key performance indicators, because again, it's going to give you a far better impression, snapshot of what's going on and what needs to be improved to ensure that you can either, you know, prevent unplanned maintenance and have higher efficiencies, that if it does occur, or if catastrophes occur like that, then you can get things up and running very, very quickly again because you've got other strategies in place. But it's a good way to measure your performance overall as a team, as a unit. And then down to individuals as well. When do we maintain? The time lag effect. It's appropriate, let's consider these things. It's appropriate to wait until the last minute before carrying out a major overhaul on critical equipment. Is it? Is it appropriate? Is it best to leave some safety margin in case that equipment fails and brings the whole plant down? Yeah, is it? So again, it's about sort of saying, well, everything's going very well now. So, sorry, what do you need this increase in your maintenance budget? Everything's going well. Nothing's blown up in the last 3 months, etc., etc. Yeah, okay, that's one way to think about it. But there are time lags in terms of also going, yeah, that's great, but that machine over there, I can tell that it really needs for some maintenance to occur. So the equipment which has been well maintained in the past is likely to lasting that little bit longer. That's okay, that's great. So you've got good maintenance in place, but it's difficult to estimate when suddenly it's going to fail, even though you've been looking after it. In many cases, we can let things go for a long time, but it's a mistake to assume that because we've delayed the maintenance, then we can continue to delay the maintenance. Okay, everything's all right. Yeah, we're sort of like overdue, but that's okay. It's still working. So this time lag effect, as I'm trying to add and expand on, is that if adequate levels of maintenance are not carried out, the effect will not be noticed immediately. It may take several months, a year, or even longer. So yes, things might be going really well, but with your forward thinking and your forward planning, you're sort of saying, yeah, that's all well now, but there's a bit of a time lag occurring here. When trying to justify maintenance costs, maintenance planning, maintenance strategy, resourcing, shutdown scheduling, parts acquisition, all those kind of things, maintenance managers or planners frequently faced with the need to justify why and when to perform maintenance by explaining the time lag effects. In other words, you won't have to go to management and say, yeah, I know everything's going really well now. Yeah, I know the planned maintenance is coming up in 2 months' time, but after that, we also have to take into consideration these things. Oh, okay, but is that in your planned maintenance? Yes, it is, but keep in mind that that's just our upcoming 2 monthly one that we've got scheduled. So again, it's trying to convince people that to be forward thinking in those regards and to understand that it does take some time for some things to fall over, or you are just patching up stuff to keep it moving forward. So then, who's responsible for maintenance? Traditionally, it's been like the sole responsibility of the maintenance unit. Those guys over there, okay, with the overalls, way you go. But over time, there's been changing perspectives on this. So when we get specialist equipment requiring expertise from the manufacturer to carry out service and repairs, then sometimes our maintenance unit doesn't have that training in that particular, say, haul truck or whatever the case may be, or grader. It may be a completely different model, obviously, but it could be a completely different company. It could be Caterpillar, compared to something you brought from Mitsubishi or Komatsu or something like that. So the idea, of course, is that with the manufacturer bringing in their own people, well, then, of course, you don't have sole responsibility as members of the maintenance unit. So the consequence is that maintenance is shared. It's shared between the organisation, the maintenance unit, the manufacturers, and the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, we call them. Also, the other, not just evolving perspectives, but the influences that have basically been pushing hard on these perspectives is that we have ongoing globalization. So we get downsizing of operations. If that happens, then, other areas get cut. So maintenance is going to be one of those as well. So we're going to get downsizing in the maintenance units. So some of the strategies put in place is to hire external contractors. So the consequence is that maintenance is shared responsibility between the organisation, because they're paying the bills, and you've got to go hat in hand and sometimes and ask for improved budgets, or basically they're providing you budget. Your maintenance unit itself, the manufacturers, and now, of course, the contractors. And then over time, it was realised that you've got these people walking around with skills that are operating the production line, the wash, the wash tower, whatever it might be. So hang on a minute, maybe they'd be able to look after some of the maintenance as well. So like one term that's used is operator maintainers. So the plant operators with trade skills can perform pretty basic maintenance and could maintain the plant whilst it's down, whilst operate the plant as well. Consequence is now, that responsibility is being further shared between the organisation, the maintenance unit, manufacturers, contractors, and now the operator maintainers, or the production unit really is who they belong to or what they belong to. So again, technological advances. We've got very different condition monitoring processes than we used to have. Some very good sophisticated things that we can hook up onto critical machinery. The evolution of now specialists that look after that. So now you're bringing in condition monitoring companies that specialize in that particular type of condition monitoring. So yes, maintenance is still a shared responsibility. Organization, the maintenance unit, manufacturers, contractors, production unit, and now condition monitoring companies. Now, this doesn't occur at all organizations, of course, but it just shows you the complexity of what can occur over time when, you know, as the maintenance unit, you'll find that you're not solely responsible. Smart design, again, things come in, maintenance cost gets reduced because of, you know, the elimination of old systems. Engineering teams now come in and take more responsibility for maintenance. So again, it's shared between the organization, the maintenance unit, manufacturers, contractors, production unit, condition monitoring companies, and engineering teams. Keeping in mind that it's a mix of those things and not always those things, but just to show the complexity. Then what about over time, the specialist maintenance companies that come on board, and we see them, you know, in iron ore, we see that in the coal industry as well, where people have worked in the industry and then gone out into private enterprise and they set up their own maintenance companies. So again, interestingly, what happens is that it's not always beneficial to the outcome because you're giving up a lot of information to these people who aren't part of your crew, really. They're paid employees, there's no doubt about that, but they're contracted. So the reality is they have lots of information about your, you know, your equipment, your maintenance processes, etc., etc. So alliance agreements come up where pretty much you have to have a very good relationship between that specialist maintenance company and your organization. So there's areas of common interest recognized and developed, so you work on those together. The responsibility for understanding those maintenance KPIs falls squarely in the hands of management, though, because obviously, ultimately, they've got to make sure that things keep operating, production keeps going. So the consequence is that now management, more than ever, must take responsibility for maintenance. Also, as you might imagine, if you're wandering around a workplace and something's a little bit dangerous, or it's pretty obvious that something's about to blow, or if you leave that, you're not a maintenance person, but you might be just, you know, obviously an engineer, you could be groundsman or even so. So the point of the matter is that we have a duty of care. So the common law judgments and statutory laws relating to workplace health and safety is a key factor in discussion about who's responsible for maintenance. So in other words, if you walk past as a company employee, even though that maintenance is not your area, the reality, of course, is that you should speak up and do something about it. So where a critical equipment problem needing maintenance is spotted by any member of the organization, it becomes that individual's responsibility, obviously, to report it. So who's responsible for maintenance? Everybody in many different ways. And that's why it's so complex from that viewpoint, but it's complex also because of the the organization's business objectives as well. So coupled with all those things, yeah, it's can be a pretty tough job, really, isn't it? Now, there are different forms of maintenance management. We're going to concentrate on for a little while about business-centered maintenance. And this is where the organization, you know, if we define that, it's basically collectively made up of a set of systems that go about trying to define and also to implement business objectives. Elements within the organization are subsystems interacting with each other to achieve the business objectives, whether it's marketing, production, occupational health and safety, maintenance, engineering. All those subsystems obviously have to work together collectively to get your end product and obviously meet your business objectives. Now, business-centered maintenance, it's a strategic thought processes used to link management strategy to maintenance objectives to business objectives. Recognizes maintenance does not stand alone. It must respond to changing requirements of business. As we talked about beforehand, you know, if the price of iron ore goes through the roof, well, yeah, we're going to have to run the machinery harder to get stuff out. So then the business objectives have changed for greater production. So therefore, then there's more wear and tear on your equipment. So therefore, then there's going to be changes to your maintenance objectives as well. Market forces alter business objectives means that the maintenance function must be responsive to it. Inputs, interactions, and interconnectedness within other subsystems, then you come up with this systems approach, engineering systems approach. Creation of maintenance plans, structure of systems and administration procedures, documentation, that type of thing. So business management is a holistic approach. So you kind of look at these kind of things where the strategic thought processes that you've got to take into account, you know, your stores, but not only that, of course, who's going to order the stores? Well, you might find some administration person, it's got to go through finance, got to go through your budgeting team, etc., etc. Oh, going to, you know, acquire some assets, so therefore then you've got to look at the life plan, you've got to talk about interactions with companies like Caterpillar, Komatsu, that type of stuff, but also equally with your budgeting process, with your, you know, your maintenance strategy. Have you got planned that in 2 years' time you're about to acquire some new equipment, etc., etc.? So in those contexts, it really looks at you know, interactions between a whole range of processes in terms of, you know, forward thinking, in terms of looking at interactions, interconnectedness, and things like that. All right. Just feeling a little bit more now. Since maintenance units don't operate within a vacuum, then what happens is that you must respond to the needs of the whole organisation as the organisation responds to marketplace. So, as I say, if you alter the business objectives, it will alter the production objectives, which will alter your maintenance objectives. Sales and production areas respond to changing market demand, alter sales and production workload to align with the altered business objectives, and corresponding change in plant operating patterns with increased or decreased plant operation time. So therefore, then your maintenance plans and maintenance schedules must be updated, and the alters the maintenance workload to align with altered business objectives. So consequently, maintenance units as one subsystem of the organisation, got to realise that it will be influenced, it's got to link in with those other subsystems and work collectively to obviously overall meet the evolving business objectives. So it's tough. All right, maintenance and continuous improvement, plan, do, check, act, the PDCA cycle. Again, this is just another method that we can use to help us with defining, analysing, and ensuring that we can put some maintenance in place and also ensure that the maintenance that we've done is effective. So planning, we define the problem or the opportunity, analyse the situation and choose an area that offers the most return for the effort expended. So thinking about, say, again, a haul truck coming into your workshop. You got to think about, okay, what is the problem? What are you pinpointing? Is it an overall, you know, stripping this particular vehicle down? Is it just, you know, changing filters? What is it? So you've got to plan, define the problem, analyze the situation. So therefore then you've got to implement it. You've got to get documents, procedures, etc., etc. You've got to make sure you've got the stores ordered so that comes into documentation. Check, once you've got this, you know, machine all put back together again and it's about to drive out of your workshop, obviously, is everything checked? Is everything, you know, crucially working, etc.? How are you going to, is there other things that when you were doing it that you were able to monitor other things that were occurring? So, you know, check, basically. What went wrong? What got you here? So in other words, could you do this faster? Could you do it in terms of your maintenance strategy, your maintenance planning? Can you now see that, you know, you might have to do this more frequently, less frequently, and then act. Make decisions on, you know, the data that you've collected, the experiences you've had. So if the results were not as expected, obviously repeat the process, document the process. So the idea, of course, is that on individual devices, vehicles, you've got records on, you know, their performance and their maintenance, obviously, and then, of course, keeping an eye holistically about scheduling and planning and organising stores and downtimes and that type of stuff. So the plan, do, check, act cycle is exceedingly important in that and in other areas as well. So it was conceived by Sherhart. So a dynamic model provides a framework for system or process improvement. Completion of one turn of the cycle flows in the beginning of the next, thus initiating continuous improvement. So the idea, of course, this is a cycle. It's not a one-off. You don't plan, do, check, act, and then stop. You've obviously got to cycle back through again to improve and continuously improve what you're doing. So business-centered maintenance promotes continuous improvement and aligns with the principles of PDCA. Strategic thought process is circular. Maintenance control uses the documentation systems to match actual achievements against stated business objectives, and the results are used to determine if corrective actions is required. So those corrective actions may, again, as I say, change your maintenance scheduling for that particular vehicle, particular line of vehicles, whatever it might be. So it's going to influence those things. Now, with maintenance management, asset management, this is obviously an undergraduate unit, but This is a bit of an advertisement now. This is kind of things that we do in our postgraduate unit as well. So it's subject to change, as you might imagine, but just to give you a snapshot as you move forward after finishing undergraduate studies, you might be interested in our postgraduate studies. So that just gives you a bit of a snapshot. We're going to just finish off by looking at strategy, organisation, systems and documentation, just again in a general sense. But they're the typical things that are covered in the graduate certificate, and then you can do a graduate diploma and then a master's. So building on what you've done in the undergraduate. All right, so maintenance strategy. Kelly states that maintenance strategy is concerned with matching maintenance objectives with business objectives. Yeah, okay, we've kind of got that, which we've gone through. Deciding how to maintain the plant. Yeah. Setting up a maintenance organisation. Yeah, because otherwise it's not just a maintenance unit. It's got to be a philosophy across the organisation. Establishing systems to direct maintenance activities. Yeah. Understanding demand fluctuations and developing appropriate responses like major maintenance windows, shutdown processes. Yeah, so there's a bit of a down. Doing it in the market, well, that might be a good time to do it, but as we know, when the market's up and you're trying to get as much production through, it's very hard to shut down things. So, yeah, it's a continuous jostle. Maintenance strategy follows the same steps as management strategy process. So, in other words, that's why it's maintenance management. It's got those typical things. The maintenance department is not an isolated system or an island unto itself. It has influence over and is influenced by the other subsystems within the organisation. And to ensure this interconnectedness is constructive and not destructive, maintenance strategy must be set and be linked to the organisation's business objectives. Talked enough about that, I think. Maintenance strategy, again, if you've got all this stuff sitting around or you're trying to use it, then you've got to have huge investment and either bits of equipment that are driving around or mobile units or haul trucks or trains or whatever they might be, graders or drag lines. And then, of course, you've got the plant sitting there stationary, the wash plant, etc., etc. But whatever it might be, there's got to be some return on investment. So the return on investment is any decision relating to maintenance or use of maintenance resources must be considered in light of its effects on the organisation's bottom line. The amount of value to receive over time is relative to the amount of resources invested. Usually refers to the investments, but not often spoken about with respect to maintenance. So again, it's probably a good thing to think about. I suppose in some ways you already do, because you've got this piece of equipment and you're trying to run it for as long as you can, for as best as you can, to maintain it as best you can. So you're trying to general sense, without perhaps verbalizing it or thinking about it, is getting the best return on investment that you can for that particular haul truck, grader, whatever it might be. So however, maintenance can be considered an investment, particularly preventative and predictive maintenance. And maintenance strategies can relate to return on investment for all maintenance though it's difficult to calculate. So again, when arguing for more in your budget and your management, well, you can argue that returns on investment. You can go back and argue and say, well, hang on a minute, I'm managing these things as the maintenance manager exceptionally well. So the point of the matter is that, this is why I need these further funds. But again, we're talking to management, so it can be difficult to quantify perhaps, but or at least, well, you can quantify these things by all those things that we've been talking about, the savings that you've made and the ways that you've been able to get good return on investment for that particular haul truck or whatever it might be. But then, of course, it's ultimately a management decision about whether you get more funding, etc. But again, that's all part of your package to argue. Now, the following table helps assess some tangible and intangible benefits for calculating the return of interest. Okay, you can talk about financial benefits, you can talk about organisational advantages, and you can talk about technical advantages. So let's have a look at a couple. Financial benefit is the extended plant life. So you can look at its book value, higher plant availability. You can sort of look at the overall improvement then. You're utilising the capital effectively. Are you utilising the capacity of that particular, haul truck or whatever the case may be? So the key thing is that you can start mapping out some of these things and then use these as arguments, as I say, to come up with the amount of hours that's been spent, the percentage of time that's being used or saved, and of course the frequency of these kind of issues and problems that you might have had and had to overcome. So in those terms of those financial benefits, in terms of those organisational advantages about planning for your workforce, or technical advantages, this is just an example. You can go and draw up your own tables for the advantages of maintenance, but the reality is, again, it doesn't hurt to have some, some good arguments and some ways of, again, helping you to define your KPIs and helping you to display that you are meeting your KPIs and maybe exceeding them. All right, so human considerations, customer relations, etc., etc. So again, it's just a way for you to critically analyze your maintenance strategy and your maintenance outcomes. Maintenance and safety. Well, as we've talked about beforehand, maintenance pretty much is everybody's responsibility. So as I say, if you're walking past something and there's steam coming out of it and it could blow, or there's some smoke or something, or it's pretty obvious that it's getting run down, then as you might imagine, there are legal requirements for you to ensure that people have a safe workplace. So everyone has the right to expect to return home from work uninjured. Safety of workplace is paramount importance and common foundation of all maintenance management activities. Priority is not only an ethical one, but it's also obviously a legal imperative. Legal requirements. Well, you'll see, celebrated cases in the running through the media at different times, where people have sadly been injured by workplace accidents. So, over the years, this has now been enshrined in law. In the federal court, the duty of care was defined under this act in 1956. And in a general sense, the key facet of it is that the duty of care is that of a reasonably prudent employer, and it is a duty to take responsible care to avoid exposing the employees to unnecessary risks of injury. Okay, that's at the federal level. Now, again, in Australia, we obviously live under federal and state law, so state parliaments also enacted legislation in keeping, the employer and employee safe, and they are a legal obligation. So in Western Australia, there's the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1984, the Workplace Health and Safety Act of Queensland, as you might imagine, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Northern Territory, all similar things, but just give you some examples. So maintenance is important in ensuring safety as well. So duties imposed on employees and third parties, like again, if you've got a contractor coming on site, visitors in a general sense, then there are legal requirements to make sure that they are able to move around the plant, the organisation safely. The legal and ethical backdrop that we're talking about, there's obviously brings in strategies for maintenance and safety must be developed and implemented. You must do maintenance in a safe manner. Forms part of high-level maintenance strategy and may include all maintenance shall be carried out in a safe manner requiring consideration of hazards and the review of job safety analysis before commencing any job. The condition of plant and equipment shall not pose a safety threat to any employee, and contract maintenance personnel shall be fully inducted before entering the site and having adequate supervision, including the appointment of a responsible officer. The level of security and safety required depends upon the nature of the industry and the hazards involved. Okay, obviously, if I'm walking around a production line that's making biscuits compared to a mine site or an underground, well, obviously the security and safety requirements are going to be very, very different. However, the potential of causing pain and suffering to a person as a result of failure to undertake due care is a risk no one ought to accept. Okay. Okay, what about maintenance in the environment? Well, again, legal obligations there. There's moral and ethical, community obligations, and certainly community expectations. Community fully informed environmentally damaging incidences caused by inadequate maintenance where organisations are responsible. They're tried by the media, tried by courts, the share market. The price of your company drops very quickly. And the general population, of course, as soon as you have an accident, and again, if it's related to maintenance in particular, that's your responsibility. Then things like oil leaks into waterways that then get into maybe the reef. Toxic gas is released into the air, and again, worldwide, there's classic, sad examples of these things that then the company has been seen to be liable for not providing a safe workplace. So, very, very conscious of these things. So the Commonwealth Government enacted the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act in 1999, provides a national framework, again, federal government, Commonwealth Government, looking at things nationally. State governments looking at things on the state level, and again, each of the state governments and the territories have these kind of things. Due diligence, so it's required to ensure relevant legislation is not breached. So again, to mitigate risks, industrial organisations have implemented international standards like the iOS 1401 standard. Best practice specification for environmental management systems ensures consistent approach to integrate environmental management of all levels of organization. So in other words, it's all the way down to, you know, in the workshop, you've got used oil coming out of that haul truck. What do you do with it? You know, it's got bits of metal in it. It's got very dirty oil in it. So again, these environmental practices are exceptionally important. Things like, as we said beforehand, if you've got a slurry dump area, or if you've got wastewater areas, they have to be appropriately managed so that they're not poisoning the environment, and also they're not released into streams, etc., etc. So due diligence is certainly a very, very important aspect. The ISO 1400 definition of environment is surroundings in which an organization operates, including the air, water, land, natural resources, flora, fauna, humans, and their interrelation. So surroundings is within the organization to the global system. So it's not just, you know, downtown Mount Isa where you're releasing, you know, fumes into the air, etc., etc. But it has to be looked in the context that that's in Queensland, that's in Australia, then of course, you know, Asia, etc., etc. So whether it's Mount Isa, whether it's you know, a mine at Dysart, whatever the case may be, the air, the water, the land, natural resources, flora and fauna, all have to be taken into account, including the humans and the interactions of those things. So ecosystems and the importance of ensuring that we safeguard against any industrial problems like that. Now, the level of inclusion of environmental considerations into the detail of your maintenance strategy will depend upon the environment in which the organisation operates and the nature of the particular industry. Again, as you might imagine, working in the coal industry compared to, you know, on a production line for biscuits or for a television, then the safety requirements, the environmental requirements are going to be completely different. You know, how do you dispose of waste? How do you manage waste? How do you recycle waste even? So 2 considerations with respect to the maintenance, you know, strategy, maintenance planning, and the process overall in the environment is ensure the appropriate criticality is assigned to those failures that could cause environmental harm, and that an appropriate equipment maintenance plan is enforced. So in other words, no matter what the equipment is, ensure that in terms of its maintenance and its, you know, its safety to people and the environment has to be built into your maintenance plan. Ensure the control and minimisation of waste associated with the maintenance activities, disposable, as we've already commented about. There's other things as well. So what about the maintenance organisation? Kelly talks about the primary task of maintenance organisation is to match maintenance resources, men, women, spares, tools and information to the maintenance workload so that the maintenance objective, sustaining at minimum total cost, the plant which is capable of producing the desired level and quality of output can be obtained. So in other words, again, this interactive idea, keeping in mind that, you know, it's humans, it's devices, it's workloads of those people, it's, you know, ensuring that overall as a maintenance organization, the idea is that you're keen to ensuring that maintenance is done appropriately, timely, and obviously there are checks and balances to make sure that you can overall see how the interconnectedness with it in the production and other parts of the organization. So the elements of maintenance organizations are resources, the components of which are the employees, the spares and tools. Administration, the structure of authority that decides the who, what, when and how work is to be undertaken. The structure, so there's no one-size-fits-all structure for a maintenance organization. The most appropriate form depends upon the plant location, available resources for maintenance activities, maintenance workload and pattern, and of course the cost of unavailability. The maintenance structure evolves over time to adjust to the changing needs and the business objectives of the whole organization. All right. Documentation. So this day and age, we, you know, have quite large computerized documentation systems that are interrelated. In other words, you can do anything from a job sheet that then will basically generate, you know, the order, or can help to generate the order for the particular parts that you require for that particular maintenance process. So again, all those subsystems within your documentation, there's, we talked about those charts and defining standard times and standard rates and what is the job made up of. So in this case, the hierarchical approach is useful for modeling organisation, the market and operating environment, the organisational substructures, subsystems, and the interaction between those subsystems. So therefore then really it's back to that systems approach, looking at subsystems, how they operate individually and how they interrelate and how they're interconnected overall to build up the whole organisation. Kelly says that the maintenance system can be considered to be made up of a number of subsystems, example, short-term planning, maintenance, control. Use inputs from other subsystems such as finance plus information for control and decision-making to produce your outputs. You must have a control element to monitor the performance. So those KPIs, remember, you've got to have some way of checking and ensuring that things are working and things are well balanced. Again, talking about the maintenance systems and documentation, we can talk about the maintenance systems and the maintenance subsystems that have major influences on the operation of the maintenance unit include configuration control systems that keep track of the technical specifications of all your plant assets. So you can't keep all the stuff in your head. As we talked about beforehand, if you've got people moving about and somebody moves on, well, it's no good if that information is in their head. You've got to have those technical specifications and all that information written down and documented so that anybody can access it and anybody can update it and have the ability to interrogate it. Turnaround or shutdown management, so that's to do with your planning, your scheduling, allocating and controlling. That's a good subsystem. Rotable equipment control systems that keep track of the location, condition status and maintenance history associated with that rotable plant items. That's kind of what I was thinking about in the first one. Just to draw a point to it. Rotable means that it's the component or inventory item that can be repeatedly and economically restored to fully serviceable conditions. In other words, it could be a pump, it could be your haul truck, it could be your grader, it could be your conveyor belt. So it's a particular piece of your inventory items or your component that is able to be, as you see, repeatedly and economically maintained, restored. A workflow control system that includes aspects of planning, scheduling, work allocation, performance, and closure of work orders. So in other words, close a loop. If I put out a work order, I want a good flow system that keeps track of those things, the planning of it, the scheduling of it, who gets allocated to do it, who's done it, was it done very well, check on the performance indicators. And then, of course, some sort of message, some documentation has to come back and say, yep, it's done, it's safe, it's now ready to go back in the field. A work permit system for issue and control of safe work permits and control of safety procedures for access to dangerous areas, whether that's down a mine shaft, whether it's driving down into an open pit, whether it's moving about a conveyor belt out in the field, must be able to have safety measures and permit systems to enable somebody that needs to go and work on that there's appropriate documentation to ensure that there's safety and they're checking to make sure that they're working safely. And a system for development and review of equipment and maintenance plans. So again, it's great to have a plan. To be followed the plan, again, PCDA, we go back around again and check PDCA, so make sure that we are doing good holistic thinking is the way to think about it, I guess, to get good outcomes. Now, the need for maintenance document systems, well, in terms of the business-centered maintenance, it's based on linking your maintenance strategy with your business objectives and making sure you're reaching it and doing it and documenting it so that you can prove that you've done it. Again, if you want to keep aligning your maintenance objectives with your business objectives. To achieve continuous improvement and to provide feedback, a documentation system for recording and conveying information obviously is essential. And again, as we say, when you go back to argue for your budget, you've got all this documentation to help you formulate your argument and demonstrate why you need 2 more staff, why you need a new haul truck, whatever the case may be, or why you need to do this shutdown, etc., etc. Kelly talks about that maintenance documentation system is made up of interrelated components, the planned inventory, maintenance information base, maintenance schedule, condition monitoring, short-term work planning and control, shutdown work planning and control, maintenance control. And again, as I say, a lot of these things are computerized these days, but again, they are interrelated for obvious reasons, that I can't have a shutdown if I don't have the appropriate timing for it to be done, if I don't have the appropriate stores, if I don't have the appropriate staff, whether they be external contractors coming and do it all lined up, etc., etc. So all that has to be documented, ready to go, or enable you to process through it. But also, of course, as we talked about, if somebody's not there, somebody's sick, or as we say, somebody moves on, then there is a record of those things. The whole thing doesn't stop. Things keep moving on. So maintenance documentation is exceptionally important. And of course, it might seem like a minor thing, but Keeping control of document control versions, it's exceptionally important because no good looking at a plan or procedure if it's not the latest one, because obviously then that raises issues of safety, risk management, things like that become quite substantial. So again, version control exceptionally important. So just to finish off, we're going to talk about a little bit about the maintenance management and the evolution of it. Well, it might seem odd to you, but in reality, maintenance has been around for a long time, I suppose, depends how we argue, but the concept of maintenance is as old as the Hindu religion. It refers to, in the scriptures, to an endless time cycle of creation, maintenance, and destruction. The act of maintaining, probably just as old, so 40,000 years ago, when we look at the Australian Indigenous people and their rock paintings and things like that, well, they maintained them. They went back to those sacred sites and repainted them and touched them up and things like that. 5,000 years ago, yes, even at the pyramids, there were maintenance managers wandering around checking on stuff. And then, in the modern era, as we move, and the modern era started way back with the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s. So as that became more sophisticated, from looking at steam-driven machines, etc., then maintenance of those machines, maintenance of factories, maintenance of production lines, obviously the characteristics of maintenance, characteristics of industry in itself, safety, and obviously the way that production was done and the way that machines have to be maintained, again, has been continuously evolving. Growing expectations of maintenance. So as you can see, the first generation, the second generation, third generation. First generation, basically fix it when it breaks, so run to fail. Second generation, looking at longer equipment life, lower cost, higher plant availability. The third generation is now, again, obviously wants to have higher plant availability and reliability, greater safety, better product quality, no damage to the environment, and longer equipment life, and a greater cost effectiveness. So again, it just keeps evolving in that regard. But again, it gives you a good snapshot. Sherwin says that historical factors have had a significant influence on the way maintenance is managed now, and that the historical influence has not always been a logical best choice. Morbury talks about, believes that for maintenance to evolve such that the maintenance engineering and maintenance functions need to be combined. Okay, that's good. So what does that really tell us about the further developments of maintenance? Well, it just means that as we've seen, there's been more issues to do with safety, there's been more issues to do with the environment, there's more issues to do with recycling, that type of thing in maintenance, and also using, doing more with less as always. So it is quite an interesting field, and as we've seen with the British Standards Institute talking about defining maintenance and then moving on to PAS 55 and then basically helping to define asset management, maintenance management, and then going on to international standards. So evolving, it's an evolving area all the time. So what will be the future developments, I wonder? All right, so in summary, Module 1, we've considered the definition of maintenance and what's meant by maintenance within a modern industrial organization. We've discussed a systems view, or systems engineering view, if you like, of maintenance, along with the relevance of business-centered maintenance. Strategic thought process has been used to link the objectives of maintenance with business objectives and strategic goals of the organization. Consider the need for maintenance systems and the attributes of the maintenance organization that have been described, and provide an understanding of the current state of maintenance management and review the evolution of maintenance management. This information is contained in the module, sets the scene for maintenance for you as a maintenance professional. It's a challenging role, fundamental to the overall success of the organization, just like production, just like marketing, just like anything else. But overall, as you can see, a very, very responsible, very, very detailed and interrelated task overall to be involved with maintenance.